Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Matty T here. I'm going to be taking a quick deviation away from Pokemon TCG and Pokemon TCG Pocket, and today I just want to make a video on the overall next generation of Pokemon games. This is going to be kind of a speculation video, but more so a video about really what the future of Pokemon holds and what Generation 10 is going to mean for the future of the Pokemon franchise. I'm very, very, very excited about what is around the corner here. Now, we don't have any official news on Generation 10. However, with the new Terra leak that came out a couple weeks ago, there's a lot of different information regarding the next generation of Pokemon games and just any and all future Pokemon games that are set to release here in the next year or two. The first thing that I want to talk about, and this isn't going to be a video just going over all of the leaks, however, there is one thing that I would like to discuss and one thing that I want to go over, and that is this conversation that was leaked between Game Freak employees, specifically regarding the Pokemon anime, but there's a lot of really interesting bits in here that we can kind of derive from the conversation that they had. What is it about Zygarde's appearances, or what about the Zygarde appearance, rather, is what this conversation is titled. And at the beginning of this conversation, as you can read, they talk about the appearance of Zygarde and Mega Zygarde in the Pokemon anime specifically. But if you go down a little bit, there's a couple things that I think are really, really, really interesting. Right here by Matsumiya, I believe, in the middle of the conversation here, he says that since we removed the island hopping aspect, there's no more worry about cannibalization. But I'm still worried about the school setting disappearing completely. Now, of course, they're referring to the Pokemon anime. However, it's very, very interesting here that they talked about the removal of the island hopping aspect and how that makes it so they don't have to worry about cannibalization. Now, we can make the inference that this island hopping perspective that they're talking about is referring to the next generation of Pokemon games in Generation 10 overall. If you go down a little bit, they talk more about the introductory of Mega Evolution, the surprise introduction of Mega Evolution in the anime and as well in the game. So this almost kind of confirms that we will be getting Mega Evolutions back in the next generation of Pokemon games. In fact, I believe that we're going to see Mega Evolution in Pokemon Legends ZA. I'm going to make a video about Pokemon Legends ZA here soon, given all of the leaks and all the information that we have on the game, but right now we're just going to focus on Generation 10. So very interesting that Mega Evolution might be coming back. But at the very beginning here, you can see that they reference two different concepts or two different games, and these are actually the code names for the last two regions, or rather the current Pokemon region, Scarlet and Violet games, as Titan, and the next generation of Pokemon games, or the next region, being referenced as Gaia. So as you can see here, the synergy with Titan is lacking, so it might be nice to have more school segments along the way. Again, inferring that Titan is referring to the Scarlet and Violet theme. Feels like such a wasted opportunity overall. I don't understand why we're skipping Titan and instead heading in a Gaia-like direction. Making it alongside Gaia risks a similar atmosphere. So this is very, very interesting. So they're referencing Gaia and referencing island hopping as a sort of a theme for the next segment of the Pokemon anime. But again, we can make the inference here that this is what they're talking about in terms of the next generation of Pokemon games or the next region of Pokemon games. If we head over to Twitter, there's been a lot of course, conversation and speculation, but one user in particular that goes by the name of Riddler Koo. This is somebody that seemingly has a lot of Pokemon insider information. He has leaked a lot of different things and given a lot of hints as regard to future Pokemon projects. And one of the tweets that he put out, or posts he put out on X just a couple weeks ago, was hinting at the next Pokemon generation. And a couple of the hints that he gave was one, the prayer hands emoji, one being that there's too much water. He referenced too much water, which of course is a reference to a meme from an IGN review of Omega Ruby and Apple Sapphire, but he did reference too much water. And if we put these two things together, or rather people on X put those two things together, and they came up with a lot of different theories, and right now the most popular theory about the next region or the next Pokemon games, which region they're going to be themed on, or which, what they're going to be based on, is actually Greece. And this actually makes a lot of sense because people have put two and two together about the island hopping aspect, too much water. The prayer hands emoji can be, referencing sort of the Greek god pantheon. And I think that actually makes a whole lot of sense here. And I'm actually almost entirely confident that this is going to be the next theme for the next generation of games that we're going to get. Generation 10, the Gaia region, or the Gaia generation, however you would like to call it, is going to be Greek-inspired or Greek-themed. This makes, again, a whole lot of sense because island hopping is sort of, reference to, an archipelago, which is, of course, a series of different islands. This is of course, how the geography is in that area of the world in Greece. And it just makes a lot of sense. We've gotten the Sinnoh region, which was based on Italy. We had Sword and Shield, which was based off of, the United Kingdom. And then, of course, we had Scarlet and Violet, which was focused on the country or the region and the culture of Spain. And before that, of course, we had France and the Kalos region. So it kind of makes sense that we're kind of staying on this, these European themes. If you go farther back, of course, we had games in the Alola region, which was focused around Hawaii. A lot of water themes, a lot of island themes there as well. But now we're kind of getting back to that, and it definitely seems like sort of the direction that the Pokemon games are going to go. And the next region of Pokemon games is going to be based on sort of that Greek geography. This is really, really interesting, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about what this means for the next series of Pokemon games, or the next mainline Pokemon games. We don't know, of course, what they're going to be called or anything like that. There's actually been no official announcement of it, but we can infer that the next mainline Pokemon games will be coming out at least in the next few years. Scarlet and Violet was, well, it was an extremely it sold extremely well, right? So I think it's a very divisive topic. People have a lot of strong opinions on Scarlet and Violet. Of course, we know all about sort of the graphical, the graphical fidelity sort of setbacks and the lack thereof of high quality there from Game Freak and from the Scarlet and Violet games. But what people perhaps don't talk about is how much of a giant leap forward Scarlet and Violet was for the Pokemon games. We went from Sword and Shield, which was kind of it was the first games on the Nintendo Switch, but Sword and Shield was really the first time that we had an introductory open world aspect to a main series Pokemon game in the wild area of that game. But the entire region of the Galar region wasn't open world, right? We still had routes. We still had sort of traditional aspects of Pokemon games, just with that open world wild area incorporated into it. And then we go into the Scarlet and Violet, and people probably made that inference going into Scarlet and Violet, and when those games were announced, it only made sense, really, that the next Pokemon games at that time were going to evolve on that open world aspect. Scarlet and Violet is like one large island, right? If you think about it, it's one big landmass. It's divided into areas and different sort of biomes, and I think they did a good job with the geographical sort of diversity of that open world in Scarlet and Violet. However, a lot of things seemed lacking about it, right? Not only were sort of the graphical textures pretty lacking, the detail in general was pretty lacking, and the frame rate of the game was pretty lacking. I think you can chalk a lot of that up to the difficulties of working or developing a game for the hardware, the old hardware, I should say, that is the Nintendo Switch. Now, we haven't gotten definitive news on the sequel to the Nintendo Switch, or the Switch 2, whatever they, I guess, plan to call it. But we can expect to get some news on the Switch 2 in the next year or two, which is probably going to line up pretty properly when the Generation 10 mainline series Pokemon games are going to be released. So I am confident that a lot of those hardware issues or game development issues based on the lacking hardware of the Nintendo Switch will likely be fixed. I think that there will be some cross-play compatibility between the Switch 1 and the Switch 2 in regards to the Generation 10 Pokemon games. I think you're probably going to be able to play the games on both, but I think the games will definitely be developed with the Switch 2 in mind. I know that that's a bit of a long shot since we don't have any news on the Switch 2 and we don't have any news necessarily on Generation 10, but I am confident in saying that the next Pokemon games should at least not be impacted so heavily on sort of the hardware limitations of the console in which the games are going to be developed on. I think that we're going to be kind of jumping over that hurdle. Keeping on theme with the open world aspect of Scarlet and Violet, I think that they actually did quite a good job. You got to understand, this was the first true open world Pokemon game that they had made. I know the games didn't run very well, they didn't play very, very well, but the concepts in general, I think, were actually executed on fairly well. And if we take the themes, or I guess the supposed themes in which we're kind of basing Generation 10 off of, with a Greek-inspired gameplay aspect, archipelago, island hopping geography, we can kind of make the inference that there's going to be a lot of water and a lot of water traversal in these Pokemon games. And this immediately brings to mind for me something like The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. Imagine for a moment that this Pokemon game, similar to Scarlet and Violet, is entirely open world, but instead of being one giant landmass where you kind of fly around or glide around or run around on your ride Pokemon, similar to or such as like Miraidon and Koraidon, imagine that instead of traversing the land in that aspect, you're traversing almost like an ocean, like an open ocean, similar to Wind Waker in the aspect of that, but except there's a lot more islands, right? From a gameplay perspective, this opens up a lot of different opportunities. I don't think people understand just how committed Pokemon is to sort of the water element of Pokemon. This goes way back to Pokemon Snap, or the new Pokemon Snap game that just released. I think they've done a lot of development, and they seem to really like the water theming. You could go all the way back to Sun and Moon, or Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire of that generation. It just makes a lot of sense for them to kind of be leaning in that direction. We did have some sort of water traversal in Scarlet and Violet, but it really was limited. And in fact, it was one of the few things that I thought was really lacking in that game. And I just think they didn't have enough development time. I think they were too focused on making sure that the open world was properly made. They didn't really incorporate a lot of water traversal or water gameplay elements into that game. And I think we're going to see a big difference in that in these next Pokemon games. And I'm extremely excited about it. So yeah, comment below, I guess, what your opinions are, or what you think the next Pokemon games would be like. But just imagine for a moment a game similar to The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, you know, in a very general sense, where the game is very much water based. You know, you're going from island to island, city to city, but a lot of seamless transition in between the different cultures, the different cities, and things like that. I thought they did an okay job with that in Scarlet and Violet, but I think that from a hardware perspective, they were just very limited in a way to make that open world feel large enough, but also diverse enough, and have it kind of all meshed together. Whereas if it's a bunch of different islands in this sort of this open water area, that gameplay perspective a lot easier to work around, where you can kind of focus on those particular islands, you can kind of develop them, you can kind of fill them all out, you can make them all unique, and have an open world traversal to where you can go to each of those islands, while not making it a little bit, I guess, as much awkward, making it as seamless as possible to transition from one island to another, I guess is what I'm talking about. Other than the islands themselves, it's about the experience of traveling the region through the water itself. You know, I think if they can maybe hit on ride Pokemon, you know, or the ways in which we're able to travel throughout the water, maybe they could sneak in different sort of Pokemon encounters, or maybe even like a diving under the water feature. Maybe there are some locations or areas in the game that require you to go under the water, similar to, you know, a Ruby Sapphire dive sort of mechanic. That could be really cool as well. So I'm really excited. I really am. Mega Evolution coming back is really fascinating. And that's the last thing I guess I'll touch on in specific. I think the last few Pokemon games have done an extraordinarily good job with regional variants. I think Pokemon recognizes how successful regional variants are of Pokemon, and I think it's a perfect way. I think they realize it's a perfect way for them to introduce a new Pokemon while also keeping some of that nostalgia that people have for sort of older Pokemon from the original games. It makes just a whole lot of sense. I think that they actually hit on that really well with Mega Evolution in Generation 6. Brand new Pokemon, or brand new forms of old Pokemon, and sprinkling it in with sort of brand new Pokemon. And that made Generation 6 and the X and Y games, I think, a little bit more appealing to people that had, you know, not played Pokemon in quite some time. And I think the regional variants did this, you know, the similar thing, which I think the regional forms came out in Sun and Moon, and then they had plenty more in Scarlet and Violet and Sword and Shield. So I think we're not going to get a large deviation in terms of the actual gameplay or battling gimmick in Generation 10 in the Gaia region. I think that we're going to be going back to Mega Evolution, and I think Pokemon is going to be mixing a ton of different regional forms of old Pokemon that are going to come out in Generation 10, as well as new Mega Evolutions for old Pokemon in Generation 10. And I think that's really exciting, and I think that if they pair all of those aspects with, you know, a well flushed out open world, water-based island hopping gameplay mechanic, with all of the Mega Evolutions and the regional forms, I think, you know, we're going to have a really fun gameplay experience. And I think that the future is going to look bright for the next generation of Pokemon games. But I've been talking for quite some time now. I don't want this video to be too long. I apologize if there was any, you know, anything that was maybe a little bit confusing or hard to follow here in this video. But I know we didn't talk about Pokemon TCG or to Pokemon TCG Pocket, but I really want this channel in the future to be just about Pokemon in general. And I want to do many more discussion videos in the future. So if you watch the video, if you like it, please don't forget to subscribe. Stay tuned for all the future Pokemon videos that we're going to be releasing here on the channel. I really appreciate it, guys. Once we get some official news of the new Pokemon games, we'll have a lot more stuff to talk about, but I wanted to make these sort of speculation and discussion videos leading up to the release or the announcement of new official Pokemon games, so that, you know, when those games come out, we already have sort of a track record of, you know, making content. So yeah, anyway, guys, I appreciate it. I've been Matty T. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and yeah, we'll see you guys next time.